It all started on a Saturday morning when the sun was still low and the lake shimmered like polished glass, untouched and begging to be disturbed. I'd finally gotten a break from my contractor job. First weekend in months with no calls, no emergencies, no busted pipes. And I decided I'd enjoy it the only way I knew how. Jet skiing across the lake behind my house, the lake I owned, the lake that was legally mine in writing, stamped, notarized, and confirmed on every county record, going back 30 years. I bought the property 2 years ago after working 16-hour days for nearly a decade, pouring every extra dollar into the dream of living somewhere quiet, open, and free. It came with a private lake, part of a larger ranch that had been subdivided long ago, with only my plot retaining full deed rights to the water. I'd even had the land surveyed and posted with private lake, no trespassing signs every 300 feet around the perimeter. But what I didn't realize at the time was that the HOA and the neighboring subdivision didn't care much for facts, property lines, or legal documents. They cared about appearances, they cared about control, and they sure as hell didn't like the sound of a jet ski engine slicing through their quiet Saturday morning yoga sessions. It wasn't long after I zipped across the water that I saw them, clustered on their manicured lawns like buzzards in sun hats and pastel polos. At first, it was just annoyed stares, then arms folded tight, then phones lifted in that classic "I'm calling someone important" posture. I didn't care. I was in my own zone, carving figure eights on the open water, laughing as the spray hit my face. Then I saw the patrol SUV roll up by the lakeside park. Oak Pines HOA Patrol in bold block letters, even though they had no real authority. A woman in a red blazer, perfectly ironed slacks, and a clipboard thicker than a phone book stormed down to the shoreline like she was leading an FBI raid. That was Linda Brewster, the HOA president, a woman with the attitude of a warden and the charm of a cactus. She cupped her hands and yelled across the lake, "Sir, this is a restricted community. Motorized watercraft are prohibited." I waved. I didn't respond, not because I was ignoring her, but because she didn't have the authority to stop me. My property included the lake, and I wasn't breaking a single law or ordinance. I'd even checked with the county sheriff beforehand, just to be sure. But Linda didn't care about that. She cared that someone outside her kingdom was having fun without her permission. 10 minutes later, the real cops showed up. 2 cruisers, lights on but sirens off, like they weren't sure what kind of emergency they'd been called to. I cut the engine and drifted to shore, figuring I'd show them the deed and clear everything up. But the moment I stepped onto the dock, Linda was already in their faces, throwing around accusations like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. He's disturbing the peace, endangering residents, violating environmental codes. He doesn't even live here. I stepped in calmly, holding out the laminated deed map I kept in my dry compartment. Actually, I do live here. And this lake? It's mine. Fully deeded, surveyed, and registered. One of the officers took the map and scanned it. The other raised an eyebrow. "This checks out, ma'am. He owns the lake. He's not breaking any laws." Linda's face turned the color of ripe tomatoes. But our HOA rules prohibit noise before 10 a.m. The officer nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am, but your HOA rules don't apply to private property outside your jurisdiction. His land, his lake, his rules." That should have been the end of it. Most people would have accepted the loss and moved on. But Linda, she didn't believe in losing. That night, an anonymous complaint was filed with the county zoning office about unauthorized recreational use of a water body. The next day, someone dumped a pile of dead tree limbs and yard waste right at the edge of my dock. A day after that, my mailbox got knocked over. Coincidence? Maybe once. But 3 times in a row? No chance. I installed cameras, I reinforced the mailbox, and I printed a 3x8-foot banner that I strung up between 2 trees at the lakes. edge facing their side. "My lake! My rules!" That didn't go over well. I heard from a neighbor who worked maintenance in the HOA subdivision that Linda had called an emergency board meeting to formally address the threat posed by the lake owner. Her exact words, apparently, threat, as if I were stockpiling missiles instead of enjoying a few laps on a watercraft I bought with my own hard-earned cash. But things didn't escalate again until the following weekend, when I invited a couple of friends over with their own jet skis. We grilled, drank some beers, and took turns racing across the lake. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker, ducks scattered, laughter echoed. And like clockwork, the HOA militia assembled again on the opposite bank, arms crossed, phones out, Linda front and center with a stack of printed complaints. But this time, they tried something new. The next morning, I received a letter. Official, letterhead, HOA seal, even a fake citation number. It claimed I was being fined for public nuisance, endangerment, and reckless watercraft usage. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off my porch. Then I took that letter straight to my lawyer. He laughed too. "They have no jurisdiction," he said, flipping the paper over. "But keep this. It might be useful later." That same day, I got a visit from a local reporter who'd heard about the lake conflict brewing between a property owner and the HOA. I told him everything, showed him the deed, gave him footage from the security cameras, even let him take a ride on the jet ski. The article ran under the headline, "Man versus HOA, Who Really Owns the Water?" It blew up online. Commenters took my side. Memes popped up. "My lake, my rules" became a hashtag. And Linda, she lost it. The next week she filed an injunction, claimed I was a danger to public tranquility, tried to get a temporary restraining order to ban jet skiing within 500 feet of community property. The judge tossed it out like spoiled milk. But I'd had enough. I didn't want to keep fighting these battles one by one. So I made a move that would end it for good. I contacted the county recorder's office and requested a public declaration of private ownership over the lake backed by my deed and new survey results. Once processed, it would be official, irrevocable, and public record. No more arguments, no more complaints, just the truth, in black and white, for anyone to see. The process took 3 weeks. During that time, Linda stepped up her attacks, filed bogus environmental reports, had her HOA flunkies post fake no jet skiing signs near the access roads, even tried to smear me in the local Facebook group. But I stayed quiet. I waited. And on the 23rd of that month, the recorder's notice went live. Lake Tranquility, 100% privately owned by Daniel Cross. Public access prohibited. Not under HOA jurisdiction. I printed the certificate, laminated it, and mailed a copy directly to Linda's house, first class, with a handwritten note on the back. "Try me again." That weekend, I jet skied in peace for 6 straight hours. No patrols, no cops, no HOA interference. Just open water, roaring engines, and the sweet, satisfying silence from the other side of the lake. Just when I thought things had finally quieted down, that the lake had gone back to being mine, and the HOA had retreated with their pastel shirts tucked between their legs, I got a knock on the door that made me realize this war wasn't over. It was just changing tactics. It was a Tuesday morning, sun barely rising, and I was mid-coffee when I opened the door to find a man in a gray suit holding a manila envelope and flashing a too-confident smile. "Mr. Cross, you've been served." He handed me the envelope and walked off without another word, like he was delivering a pizza he didn't want to smell. Inside was a thick stack of documents, mostly nonsense legal jargon, but the summary at the top made my blood run hot. The HOA was suing me for creating a public hazard, disturbing the neighborhood ecosystem, and, get this, operating an unauthorized recreational facility. I nearly laughed. Except this time it was filed in civil court, and they had managed to pull together a dozen signatures from their board members, all backing the claims. They were trying to drain my time, money, and patience, hoping I'd either quit or settle. But they underestimated two things: my stubbornness and the fact that I'd already lawyered up months ago. I immediately called my attorney, Paul, a sharp, no-nonsense guy who'd handled worse than this. "Looks like they're going scorched earth," he said as he skimmed the pages. "It's weak, but we'll need to respond quickly. They're trying to drag you into court just to make noise." "Then let's make a louder one," I replied. And so began round 2 of what I started calling the Lake War. I kept jet skiing that week, even more than usual. Invited over a few more friends, put up floating lights and buoys to clearly mark my property line, and even started posting updates on a YouTube channel I made for fun, Lake Life with Dan. To my surprise, the videos got attention. People loved the idea of a guy standing up to an overreaching HOA and claiming his space. One of the clips went viral, me skimming across the lake in slow motion with the banner "My Lake, My Rules" behind me, and the HOA president fuming in the background like a cartoon villain. It was funny, sure, but the message hit home for a lot of folks who'd had their own run-ins with suburban tyrants. I started getting emails from strangers thanking me for speaking up, for fighting back, for showing what could happen when you actually knew your rights and used them. Meanwhile, Paul filed a counter motion to dismiss the lawsuit. We attached the county's property records, deed documentation, environmental reports proving the lake's ecosystem was untouched, and even footage showing how the HOA members had harassed me and vandalized my property. But the HOA wasn't done. A week after filing, Linda Brewster made her boldest move yet. She held a public community safety meeting at the park near the lake and invited the press. I found out because a neighbor sent me a clip of her ranting into a microphone about how private ownership of shared natural resources threatens our harmony, and calling for legislation to return the lake to community oversight. Translation: she wanted the town to find a way to seize my property. That's when I knew this was more than just a grudge or a noise complaint. This was about power. Linda didn't just want peace, she wanted control. And she hated the fact that someone like me, someone outside their gated fantasy land, had something she couldn't regulate. So I got strategic. Instead of fighting fire with fire, I went, cold and calculated. I submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for every email and official record the HOA had filed with the town involving my name or property. It took time, but what came back was gold. Dozens of emails, some borderline unhinged, some outright fabrications. My favorite was one where Linda claimed I was training wildlife to harass residents because a goose had hissed at her granddaughter during a lake walk. Ridiculous? Yes. Useful? Absolutely. We compiled it all into a report, added timestamps, dates, and connections, then sent it directly to the court along with a formal harassment complaint against the HOA board. My lawyer called it a preemptive strike. I called it checkmate. A few days later, I was back on the lake when 2 sheriff's deputies pulled up, not to confront me but to deliver an update. The judge had scheduled a preliminary hearing to review the HOA's actions. For once, they were on the defensive. And for the first time, Linda had to answer for her nonsense in front of someone who didn't tolerate drama and didn't wear a visor. The hearing was brutal. Paul came armed with documents, video, and witness statements, including a retired surveyor who had personally reviewed my deed years ago and a local environmental officer who testified that my lake use caused no measurable harm. On the other side, Linda sputtered through vague claims about noise and safety, supported by HOA board members who couldn't even agree on the dates they were supposedly disturbed. The judge took it all in, his expression unreadable. At the end, he leaned forward and said, "I see no legal basis for this complaint. Mr. Cross owns the lake, as confirmed by every official document provided. The HOA is advised to cease interference immediately. Further filings of this nature may be considered harassment under civil statute." The gavel hit the desk like thunder. I didn't cheer, but inside, I was doing backflips. Linda, however, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon soaked in vinegar. But she wasn't the only one watching. The hearing was open to the public, and someone from the local news was there. By that evening, the story hit their online feed. Judge dismisses HOA case against local lake owner. Property rights upheld. Comments poured in. Supporters, lawyers, even other homeowners dealing with HOAs who messaged me asking for advice. I realized this was bigger than me. My story had become a symbol of standing your ground, literally and legally, so I leaned in, turned my channel into a series, posted updates, explained the laws, showed how to read a deed, file for survey verification, even how to install motion cameras that didn't violate neighbor privacy laws. I became the HOA's worst nightmare, a well-liked, well-informed guy who wasn't afraid to tell the truth. The HOA tried one last pathetic tactic. They started patrolling their side of the lake with binoculars, logging every time I so much as touched the water. One guy even stood in a kayak with a clipboard. I ignored them. The lake was mine, the law was mine, and now the narrative was mine. I started painting the shoreline with bright red buoys labeled Private, No Entry, and made sure every legal detail was included at the base. Eventually, they stopped showing up. Linda stopped emailing. The HOA board went quiet. Their meeting minutes, which I still received through the open records request, became shorter and more desperate, shifting topics away from the lake problem and back to dog poop and mailbox color violations. The war was over, not with a bang, but with an embarrassed whimper. And I rode my jet ski across the water that Sunday with the biggest grin of my life, watching the sun set on a peaceful lake that I'd fought for, defended, and now got to enjoy in total silence, except for the roar of an engine and the sound of freedom bouncing off the ripples.